licensed dietitian and nutritionist, and also to incorporate that with some of my views as a therapist. So hopefully this will be helpful to you. I think I would like to just share 3 takeaway points that I have found to be very effective with employing mindfulness in my own life, and I'm hoping that you can take these points away and use them right away as well. Or if you're already familiar with these kind of mindfulness techniques, possibly from treatment or work with your therapist before, or even reading, hopefully some of the things we're sharing today will reinforce something that you've known but maybe want to practice more regularly. And one of the first things that I have found to be helpful is present moment awareness. It is so easy to get caught up in the stress of the day. Like before this conference, our modem wasn't working and we didn't have the computer on, and it was 20 minutes to, and I'm calling the people, and my go-to defense is to flip a lid over that and be just internally like this. But I thought, well, I'm going to have to be speaking on mindfulness. So I practiced what we're actually talking about, and it helped immensely. So I suggest we do this. And one of the things about present moment awareness is you can choose to shift your awareness at any point. And that is so empowering. So if I'm feeling that blood pressure rising and stress and anxiety, I could choose. I have the choice to stay in that place or to put my mind into a different place. And I can look around at the environment, look out the window, notice the soothing breeze from the fan, just small things that kind of grounded me. And I want to encourage you to do that too. So the key thing is to remember that you choose what you focus on and are aware of, and you can choose something different. I'll give you the 2 other points, and then I guess I'll hand it over to Crystal, and then we can have some discussion on it. One last thing, sorry, I should have said this, about the present moment awareness, and this has been in my own recovery a huge issue. Dwelling on the past, regrets, embarrassments, shame, or worrying myself sick over the future. And none of those have been productive for me. But it's almost like the wiring in our brains, if we lean that direction, keeps pulling us back that way. And again, we have a choice to focus on present moment awareness. And we can say, whoops, there I am back in the past. I'm going to bring my awareness back to the moment. And the moment's pretty enjoyable. Nothing horrific's happening right now. In fact, I'm having a pleasant day. And that really is grounding for me too. And so I'm hoping that's a useful reminder. Then another concept, the second point I wanted to have as a takeaway is mindful action. So instead of stressing or worrying, I can be fully engaged in the moment, and that's pretty enjoyable. If I bring all of me, all of my mojo, all of my soul to the moment, it's a pretty rich experience in my internal world for me, and that fills me up. Versus if I'm here but I'm worrying about the kids and where I've got to be this evening and the problems that are going on in my life, then I'm not fully present, I'm not enjoying the moment, and I'm almost, abuse might be a strong word, but I'm not being very kind to myself. I'm not allowing myself to live today and get the full value out of it. So I want to encourage you to be in the moment and acknowledge what's going on around you, fully engage with the people you're talking to, pull that awareness into the moment. And I think you probably know this too, but when I do that, I'm like, holy cow, life's not that bad. This is pretty nice. And when I'm in that stressed out state, I think, God, life's just hard and tough, and it's this negative diatribe I can fall into. But as soon as I pull myself back into the moment, unless there is, seriously a trauma going on, the moment is really a lot more enjoyable and less stressful. And then the third point about mindful action that I wanted to share is just throw yourself into the moment. There is a coach that said this once, and I thought it was a really good idea, which is a kid was tentative about doing the high jump, and he said, just even though you're fearful about it or whatever, just go ahead and throw your heart over the bar first, and then your body will follow. And I thought that was really cool as an athletic analogy, but also the same thing. If we fully engage in the moment, even if we don't feel like it, we start feeling a little more passionate about what's going on, because all our energies aren't distracted on worries or past or future kinds of things. And then my final takeaway point, the third key one, is non-identify. And boy, would this have helped me in my 20s. I'm 50 now, but when I was in my 20s, I was a little dramatic. And to non-identify with a moment is, again, a choice. You can, at any moment, step back from the drama at hand and rest in an internal place of peace. And this was particularly useful for me, and hopefully some of you can identify with it, when I would have said something I regretted or started getting kind of amped up emotionally and lost some of my dignity or centeredness that I wanted to present in engagement. And I could step back, and I do that all the time now. Step back, think this is just the play that's going on out here, but I can go back inside of myself, get comfortable in my body, note my breathing, feel the weight of my legs on the chair, my feet on the floor, and find some rest. And that just, as we all know, that really calms down your central nervous system too, particularly the breathing, and makes us more effective. So it's ideal if we can be in that place when we go into stressful situations. But in real life, a lot of times it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And if you find yourself in a less than dignified presentation of how you want to interact with someone, use it, pull yourself back. It doesn't have to keep going south. You can take a minute, breathe, let there be silence, and start again. So that's what I wanted to share. Sorry if that was a lot of verbiage, but I wanted to get that out, and then hopefully look forward to hearing any input you have about that.
That was so good, Jacquelyn. Thank you for sharing that. I think you gave a really good foundation to mindfulness and just being able to cope with a lot of the things that we're bombarded with on a daily basis. And I'll kind of transition into what I was hoping to speak about today, and it's a lot of what you were sharing about, Jacquelyn. And again, thanks so much for having me here today. I'm so happy to be with all of you. And I'm going to kind of dive into the topic of mindfulness around eating, which is one of my favorite conversations to have, because I think it's really the antithesis of what an eating disorder is. You know, if you think about the behaviors that we engage in that are part of an eating disorder, they really are doing everything possible to disengage us from the present moment. And that's oftentimes why we develop an eating disorder, is that coping mechanism of getting us out of what we're feeling so we don't have to feel those painful situations or emotions that we may be facing. So learning how to do the opposite of that with mindfulness can be really difficult, because it's, you know, it's kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off. It's exposing those wounds and those deep emotions that we have and that we don't necessarily want to face. But as you develop stronger coping mechanisms, you learn how to sit with some of those feelings and not act out in your eating disorder, if that kind of makes sense. So with eating, this is huge, because, you know, I think a lot of us are so accustomed to, if not engaging in an eating disorder behavior, you know, eating kind of on the fly. Like, we are multitaskers. Our culture is very multitasking oriented. It's not uncommon to be scarfing down your lunch between phone calls and meetings, or eating while you're driving, or, you know, eating on the go. So it doesn't really give us an opportunity to sit with ourselves and kind of tune into, how are we feeling? How is this food tasting? So really being able to focus on those things is a really key and important part of becoming a mindful eater and engaging with yourself and your body while you're eating and nourishing yourself through food, which I think is really important. And There is one book, and I will stick the link in the chat box, that I really love. It's kind of a workbook, so there's a lot of different exercises that you can go through. Hopefully this comes out okay. But it's called Eat, Drink, and Be Mindful: How to End Your Struggle with Mindless Eating and Start Savoring Food with Intention and Joy. And there's a few different principles that this book talks about that I think are really important for the mindful eater awareness. And the first one is kind of what Jacquelyn was talking about, but being in the moment. That is so much easier said than done. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like our brains are kind of like computers with 20 million tabs open at once, and we're always thinking about, you know, did I pay the bills? Like Jacquelyn was saying, do I need to pick up my kids? Where do I need to go next? What time do I need to do this? I need to call this person. And it's so hard to be intentional in focusing on the present, where you are, what are you feeling, what are your situations around you. And when it comes to food, again, I think this is really important, being able to set aside some intentional time around your meals, you know, schedule it in your calendar. That's such a key part of self-care, is eating, and not just eating your food. I mean, we tend to do it very mechanically sometimes. It's just like on automate, you know, we just put food in our bodies without even tasting it. I mean, how many times have you gone through a meal? Sorry, one quick second.
Well, while she's addressing that, I agree with what Crystal's saying too about being intentional and scheduling meals. That's a great concept. I was just saying, Crystal, that being intentional and scheduling meals was a great tip while you were away, and I'm really glad to hear that, because I will deploy that more.
Yeah, and it's hard, right? I think we're so good about scheduling other things in our calendar, like our doctor appointments and all our meetings, but, you know, I feel like eating and our meals tends to get pushed to the back burner. It's like, okay, between these times I will fit in, you know, my meeting session. But I think when we can schedule that time to deliberately sit down and say, I'm going to give myself, even if it's 15, 20 minutes, you know, to have my lunch or to have a family dinner, I think that is the first step towards being able to give yourself the time to be present. You know, otherwise it just continues to be like that snowball effect of fitting things in, rather than making your schedule work for you and being conducive to self-care, if that kind of makes sense.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah, and again, I know it's easier said than done. You know, we're living in a society where we're wearing multiple different hats, and I think especially as women too, it's not uncommon to be a working mom, or even as just a professional. You know, if you're doing so many different things and have a lot of different responsibilities, self-care is sadly one of those things that gets pushed to the back burner very easily, yet it's instrumental to eating disorder recovery. You can't prioritize your recovery and maintain your recovery for the long term if you're not being intentional about self-care and doing those things that you need to keep yourself healthy and balanced. So that's one aspect that I like to focus on. Another one that I love, this is one of my favorite ones, is acceptance and having a non-judgmental approach to food. And again, this is so much easier said than done. But for example, if I say, I don't know, let me think of chocolate chip cookies, you know, think about what words or what feelings does that bring up for you? And oftentimes it's strong emotions. We have a lot of strong feelings about food that we're not even aware of. And being able to come in to a meal with a neutral approach to food is very important, I think, toward becoming more mindful about what you're eating. You know, if you're feeling negative or fearful about a certain food, then I think that's really going to reflect how you eat and how you care for yourself and how you're nourishing your body with food. Um, and the same goes the other way. You know, right now there's so many dieting trends that seem like a good thing. Like, for example, the whole clean eating dieting trend. It's super big right now. And a lot of people say they're eating clean in the name of being healthy. But if that is causing you to have a judgmental approach toward food, then I would really question the healthiness of that diet, if that makes sense. Part of learning how to eat mindfully is being able to be non-judgmental. And I know that might sound a little out there, but when you think about it, we come into meals already with these prejudgments about what we're eating and how it's going to affect our body. Sometimes we even judge like other people by what they're eating. I don't know if you've ever caught yourself doing that. And I think it takes a lot of effort and mindfulness to really let go and to really accept, you know, that all food is good for your body in some way or another, and there's no such thing as bad food, you know, all of that good stuff. So for me, that's another really important principle with learning how to eat mindfully, but also being able to nourish your body and appreciate what you're eating. I hope that kind of makes sense. And let's see. Another one that I really like, kind of a takeaway point, is practicing gratitude. And I think this really kind of goes along with what Jacquelyn was saying. It's so easy to get caught up in everything that seems to be going wrong. I think especially a lot of us who have had eating disorders can testify to the fact that we have this catastrophic thinking, you know, very black and white. And it's like, if something happens, it just kind of triggers this spiral effect of thoughts in our mind that just snowball. And it's, you know, a lot of times we just think of like the worst things that can happen, and that can just shift our entire mood, our entire day, and just kind of bury us in a hole that makes it really difficult to come out of once you're in it. And this can be with food, this can be with your body. Like, this is a huge thing with body image. You know, if you've gotten ready in the morning and put something on, you just weren't really happy with the way it fit, but it just can trigger that spiral effect of negative thoughts that are very catastrophic. So for me, I really like applying the principle of practicing gratitude, and that's something that I would just really encourage you who are listening and with us today as a takeaway point. You know, learning to find gratitude in whatever moment or situation you find yourself in. I guarantee there is something, one thing, even if it's only one thing, that you can find that you are thankful for. And it is amazing, and I'm sure Jacquelyn can talk more about this, how gratitude changes your mindset completely. And like I said, even if it's just one thing that you can focus on at a time, you know, I am thankful that I woke up this morning, that I have my health, that I'm alive, that I'm breathing. Even though the world feels like it's falling apart, I am just grateful to be alive. Or I'm grateful to have my roof over my head, or a spouse or a partner that cares about me, or a pet that loves me unconditionally, you know, whatever it might be. I think having something to be thankful for can really change your mindset when you just find yourself dwelling in that negativity. And I really like applying this to food too, because I think negativity really creeps up on us sometimes when we're eating, or just feeling, I don't know, if you're in recovery and you're feeling negative about eating or putting food in your body, or not being able to engage in your eating disorder behaviors, just thinking, you know, I'm thankful that this food is giving my body energy to do the things that I love. You know, having that kind of mentality really changes, I think, the negativity and the negative thoughts that so easily come in. So I hope those all make sense, and I think Jacquelyn can probably add a lot to that, but that's a little bit of thoughts that I have when it comes to self-care and just mindfulness around food and your body too. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I actually have some questions for you, Crystal, because that was really helpful to me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've struggled with and I've heard from clients a lot is like when we go out to eat. A lot of times, you know, we look forward to going out to eat. It's a special time. You get dressed up. It's nice. Or it might even just be casual. And sometimes the people we're with, we love, but there may be a lot of unsaid stress or issues going on. And then a lot of times it's harder to get centered and eat mindfully and not either choose something really restrictive so it's safety land, or go overboard and find yourself overeating because you're trying to sort of soothe yourself. Do you have some tips or suggestions on how to be mindful in environments like that?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a huge one for a lot of people. And even when you've been in recovery for a long time, I think going out to eat always triggers some different things, either with the company that you're around, like you said, Jacquelyn. Sometimes you might be comfortable eating, but eating around a different group of people or maybe just specific people sometimes can be triggering. I call it table talk. If you think about it, most people resort to talking about food and dieting because it's a very easy topic. You know, it's kind of one of those shallow conversation points, easy talking points that people always bring up. I like to call it water cooler talk. You know, it's like the water cooler at the office. Like people are like, oh, what diet are you trying this time? Or, you know, and that can be super triggering for someone in recovery. So I think the first aspect is really, when it comes to the food, is being able to choose something that you know will nourish your body appropriately and is not part of your eating disorder behavior. So if you're used to ordering a certain food item at a specific restaurant, let's say, I'm trying to think of something that comes off the top of my head. I can't, but a lot of times in your eating disorder, you may be used to ordering a specific item because you feel really safe about it. You might know exactly how many calories are in it, how it's served, how it's prepared, and that makes you feel safe. Yet it might not be giving your body exactly what you need, and I think that's important to discuss kind of with your dietitian. You know, what are the key components that you should be focusing on when you're eating a meal. But generally, I like to say all your meals should include the 3 main macronutrients, which are proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. So some kind of balance of those, I think, is going to ensure that you're getting what you need in that meal for your body. And like you said, Jacquelyn, sometimes it's very black and white with eating out. You know, sometimes we're fearful of food, so we just eat as minimal as possible. And other times we're like, oh my gosh, I haven't had this food in forever. It feels really special. I'm just gonna go to town on it, you know, and then we might overeat. But again, that's kind of that catastrophic black and white thinking. There is a happy medium. And with mindful eating, it really helps you kind of eat according to what your body needs. So I would say, you know, bites of your meal and enjoying and kind of recognizing the different aspects of that meal. So how is your food tasting? What are some flavors that you're picking up on? What are you noticing about textures, temperatures? And those are not things we normally think of when we eat. We just kind of like get food in my mouth, you know. But I think when you start asking yourself those questions, it really changes your eating experience. And you know, if you're accustomed to eating kind of quickly, I would say savor the meal a little bit. You know, take some bites, put your fork down long enough to have a discussion with someone that you're with, you know, and then resume eating and kind of check in with yourself periodically to ask yourself, how am I feeling? And There is a great, trying to think where it is. There's there's a scale called the hunger fullness scale that kind of rates your hunger. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, Jacquelyn, but oftentimes when we think of hunger and fullness, we only think of the extreme forms of hunger and fullness. Like when someone hears full, they often think of like Thanksgiving full, like I'm uncomfortable, sick to my stomach kind of full. But really, fullness and hunger are very subtle feelings in our body. And if we're not checking in with ourselves consistently, it's super easy to miss. So, really kind of ask yourself, how am I feeling? Does this food still seem good and appealing? Am I not quite satisfied? If not, then you might need more of that dish. So just making it a point to check in with yourself, I think, especially during restaurant outings when you might be out of your normal environment, is really important for mindful eating. But Jacquelyn, I wanted to ask you your opinion. I think relationships affect so much about how we feel. What would you say for someone in that same situation who's feeling overwhelmed by the people that they're with? How can someone be mindful and maintain that mindfulness about themselves when they're really impacted by the people who are around them?
Oh, that's a good question. And it can happen when you're out at dinner. It could happen at a wedding. It could happen at just social gatherings. Can often bring different emotions. Hopefully, a lot of them are positive for us, and we want to gravitate towards that. But I think one of the keys of mindfulness that's really useful in relationships in a situation at a meal out is that, let's say someone makes a comment that comes across as caustic or biting or hurtful, and you feel yourself reacting to that. Remember again that you can extricate yourself for a moment. You don't have to react. You have choices. This is just happening out here. You can kind of pull yourself back in, become centered within yourself, get into that present awareness of your body and your breathing. And then you also have a choice whether or not to respond at that moment, or if you want to talk to that individual privately later, or not address it at all, but maybe have a self-soothing conversation with yourself about what you're feeling about, like, geez, like that internal dialogue. If you find yourself saying, gosh, she said this and that really makes me feel bad, well, I'm aware that some things are going on for that person. This is internal dialogue, but I can check out that information with myself later. I can journal about it. I can talk to a trusted person and say, hey, is there any relevance to what I deducted from this comment? Or was it just noise out there that I should disregard? So you can also sort of put off any reaction until you've processed it. And you can protect yourself by pulling in. You can refrain from judging the moment. You can just let that statement be and continue on too. And just enjoy the positives in that environment and not focus on the negatives. Again, you have a choice of what your awareness is on.
That's really good. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that often coincides with eating, with other people. I think comments are made so easily sometimes in conversation or in being out in social groups, and that really affects how we feel about ourselves and our bodies, depending on what it is or the topic of conversation. And I think I like how you said you have a choice how you react. We kind of have our default ways of reacting, but at the end of the day, we do have a decision based on how we're going to react to that person or whatever that situation was. I really like that a lot. And I'm not sure if you saw, Jacquelyn, the polling, but it looks like our audience with us today wanted to hear more about distress tolerance and interpersonal effectiveness. And that interpersonal effectiveness, I think, is kind of along the lines of what we were just talking about. How to ask for what you want and say no while maintaining self-respect and relationship with others?
Wow. Good stuff. Great
Yeah.
question.
And for those of us who are with us today, you know, if you're having any specific questions about a certain situation that you might be facing in your own recovery, we'd love to hear it. So feel free to ask any questions at any time. But one thing that I wanted to talk about with this topic too is in regards to interpersonal effectiveness. You know, how do you maintain self-respect and relationships with others? And that's a really hard topic of conversation, I think, especially for those of us who have had an eating disorder. It's really easy to fall under the lines of what other people want you to do and kind of, what's the word I'm trying to say? You know, sometimes I think it's hard to have healthy boundaries with people. And, you know, that comes in all aspects of life, whether it's relationships, or even eating and your self-care. You know, sometimes we say yes, yes, yes to so many things, like I was talking about earlier. In saying yes to other people, sometimes we're saying no to ourselves and to our own self-care. So if you're joining us today and you have any thoughts about that, please feel free to let us know. But Jacquelyn, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts from your experience as a therapist and working along these areas. What do you think are some key points to maintaining those healthy boundaries and self-respect? You know, I think that's a really big part of being in recovery.
Yeah, yes, I agree. You know, one of my favorite go-to quotes is, I'm going to always try to operate at my highest level of integrity. And I've shared that with a lot of clients too, and I learned it in my own therapy when I was in treatment. And that's pretty, there's a lot of meat to that statement, because one of the things that, if you haven't done it when you're in treatment, you're going to need to do for an eating disorder is get real clear on your values. And is your life congruent with your values? And if it's not, there's some work to be done. And that, you know, that's an ongoing thing to meld those two. But in addition to that, operating at our highest level of integrity is going to be unique to different people. There's cultural mores and different things that, and family and different things that would make one person's value system different than another. But if we're looking at operating at our own highest level of integrity, that is being congruent with our own personal value system. And sometimes as we individuate and become adults in life, that could be some of that can differ slightly or dramatically from our upbringing, and that can be awkward because you want to honor and be respectful to your grandmother or aunts and uncles or parents or whoever might have a different value system. And I think when we're operating at our highest level of integrity and interacting with others, it infuses, at least it almost seemed to, by osmosis, infuse in me a sense of dignity, because I know who I am, and what I represent. So no matter what distressful environment might be going on in any interpersonal interaction, I can sort of feel that sense of high self-regard and dignity. It doesn't mean denying that there's been a lot of regrettable things I have done and said, and that doesn't mean that I'm a perfect person and therefore I am oh so dignified. It's that I've done the work. I've apologized as much as I can in mistakes in the past and kind of put that behind me, and I'm trying to interact with others in a way that honors the kind of golden rule that I would want to be treated with. And that, I think, you know, creates that sense of dignity for yourself. And then the other part of that question that the individual said I was really interested in, which is distress tolerance. And, you know, that's always comes up, I think, with mindfulness and DBT, therapy, because we're, learning to tolerate uncomfortable feelings, as you addressed earlier, Crystal, around food and stuff, is incredibly difficult. I'm not sure we ever are a complete master of that. I'm certainly not. But it is so empowering, and it's so valuable to those around you when you can demonstrate tolerating uncomfortable feelings, because you're raising the bar and encouraging them. So not only are you helping yourself, you're helping your loved ones that are around you see how to, they watch and they see how you deal with it. And so a lot of times we will first go to self-destructive techniques or behaviors to try to tolerate uncomfortable feelings, and those often come out in addiction or obsessive behaviors or eating disorders, things like that. And unraveling that is complicated, but if you can learn some techniques for addressing uncomfortable feelings, it's very helpful. And like some of the work I've done and that I've seen clients do with grief, or really working through trauma, past trauma, and a lot of us have trauma in our lives at some point, is to do really self-soothing things. Like when I would say, okay, I'm at work right now, so I can't just dive into this, but I'm going to go home. I'm going to intentionally choose to get in that rocking chair, and I'm going to get this old quilt from my great-grandmother, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to rock, and I'm going to go ahead and let those feelings come over me just as much as I can tolerate. And it's okay to cry and be with those emotions, and then just practice tolerating it. And then when you get to the place where you feel like, okay, that's enough, then just sort of pick up your toys and go home. And what I'm saying there is go ahead and allow those feelings to dissipate, keep rocking or whatever it is you're doing, taking a walk, and promise yourself that you can continue to create periods where you will visit those stressful or painful emotions. And that's a great building block to being able to then tolerate them in daily life, because you start learning to trust that you can endure feelings and you can practice that in daily interactions. It doesn't happen overnight. What are your thoughts on those points, Crystal?
That is so good. Well, I just really appreciate what you shared. I think that's amazing wisdom. Yeah, and I think, we've often grown up, many of us, depending on your life and your circumstances, to learn that certain feelings are bad, like it's not okay to cry, or being sad or being mad or angry are bad feelings to have. But it's kind of the same thing as I was speaking on earlier about food, that there are no bad emotions. They're just kind of like the ocean, like the waves that ebb and flow, they come and go. And I think that, like, having that mindset is a good first step to allowing yourself to feel those feelings, kind of like what you were saying, Jacquelyn, that when you recognize that you're feeling a certain way, whether it's, you're really upset about something that happened at work, or, like grief, if you've lost a loved one or something important in your life that's causing you to feel grief, I think it's important to recognize that those emotions are valid and there's nothing bad about feeling that way. And I think that helps with the distress tolerance, to know that that feeling as well is not going to remain forever, even though when you're in it and you're in the moment, it's very uncomfortable, and we want to do everything we can to change it, because as human beings, we don't like being uncomfortable. But I think when you recognize this is an emotion that is part of me right now, and it's valid and it's important to my life, I think that helps with the tolerance aspect, when you can sit with it and kind of feel that those feelings with non-judgment, without any judgment about the feeling itself. I think that really helps to kind of work through it a little bit more. That was kind of something I was thinking about while you were describing that, Jacquelyn. something else that I wanted to share was just about self-respect when you were talking about, you know, interpersonal effectiveness. And I think that really comes with how we treat ourselves and our body too. And I think for some of us, that is one of the things that takes the longest in our recovery. And I think it can feel very frustrating when you've done everything in your recovery, you follow everything that your therapist has told you, you're following what your dietitian is recommending, but yet you don't feel like you're at a place where you can love or appreciate your body. And I think a lot of us have felt that in our recovery. And I do think body image is kind of one of those things that takes a while to get to a place of acceptability. Would you say the same, Jacquelyn?
Yeah, I do. I wholeheartedly agree. It seems like body image is the lingering issue for 90% plus of clients I've worked with, and that it's something that we have to continually address.
Yeah. And I think it changes as we go through different phases in life, you know, like sometimes, you know, being a mom, or as you go through middle age, or whatever stage of life that you might be in, can change the way that you feel about your body and either intensify some of those negative feelings that may have previously been there. So I think it's also really important to be aware of that. And kind of reflect and think, you know, am I feeling negative because of certain things or circumstances in my life that may have triggered that? But I think continuing to develop that dignity, like you were talking about, Jacquelyn, and that self-respect, sometimes it doesn't look like being positive about your body. You know, not all of us wake up and just think, oh my gosh, I just love my body and I'm just ready to rock the world. You know, a lot of us don't really get to that place, but sometimes we might need to lower the bar a little bit and not place it at that level and think, gosh, just because I'm not there means that, you know, I'm failing. But self-respect can look like what I like to call body neutrality, like just feeling neutral about your body. So moving from maybe being negative towards your body to just being neutral. So if you can't find yourself at that place where you are absolutely loving your body, which I think a lot of us really struggle to get to, maybe try to find a more neutral approach to your body instead and think, you know, I might not love certain things about my body, but I'm a human being and I deserve respect, and that starts with how you treat yourself. You know, how are you caring for yourself? How do you show respect to your body? I think that's a big thing. You know, I always like to say that you're in a relationship with your body, so think about the thoughts that you have about your body throughout the day, or the things that you might tell yourself or tell your body, and ask yourself, would you tell those things to your best friend or someone that you absolutely love? And I think when we think about it in that framework, it changes things, because when you really think about it, a lot of us wouldn't say some of the things we think about ourselves towards the people we love. And I think, you know, changing that mentality, and again, not making it something that feels unattainable with body love, but even just body, being neutral towards your body and saying, you know, I deserve respect. I deserve to eat. I deserve to rest and care for myself. That's moving toward body positivity, if that kind of makes sense. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Jacquelyn.
Oh, yeah. I loved what you were just saying. And I think, you know, with the body image too, we can always go back to present moment awareness too. If the feelings are uncomfortable too, you can always shift your focus to the moment at hand and be fully present. It's hard to obsess about your body when you're fully engaged. So that's something that I've seen be helpful for clients. And I saw something just recently when I was at the beach where there was two different extreme body types, and I so wanted everyone to see this, because one was a lady that I bet was about 75 years old, and she was a really comfortable in her own skin kind of person that really exuded that. And she was a very big woman, and she was wearing a bikini, and she was walking. It was a crowded beach, and she was walking to the beach, and her self-consciousness was so low, and she was so comfortable in her own skin, and it wasn't like she even questioned. I mean, it was just remarkable. And then, so I was fascinated by her, and I so badly wanted to run up to her, introduce myself, and say, "Can I take you to dinner and talk to you, because you are amazingly awesome and beautiful?" I didn't, but then just further down the beach was another woman who was in the pinnacle of shape, like Sports Illustrated cover of the model thing too, also wearing a bikini. And I didn't sense anywhere near the same comfort in her own skin. I sensed what I think I feel sometimes, which is like, if you feel like you look really good, you're kind of more confident. I sensed that with her. Not cocky, she wasn't obnoxious like that, but I sensed that kind of confidence. But I didn't sense the same lack of constantly monitoring the environment of how am I being perceived. She wasn't as comfortable in her own skin, and she was a much younger woman too. So when I looked at those two different women, I thought, geez, that's exactly what we're all working towards, is being comfortable in our own skin. And how do we get there? And this woman was fully present in the moment. I'm assuming, I mean, I'm projecting, right? But she looked like she was feeling the sand under her toes, and she was going to wade out in that nice warm water. She was having a splendid time and not obsessing about others. And the other gal looked a little more uptight. So I just thought that was a really interesting example of body acceptance and being centered in yourself and mindful, almost as if it was her natural default, that she wasn't working real hard to get there.
Thanks for sharing that. That's really interesting. And I think it's really eye-opening sometimes just to remind ourselves, that you don't need to be at a certain weight or body size to appreciate and respect your body. And I think a lot of us have that disordered form of thinking, thinking like, when I get to X weight or this size, this clothing size, then I'll be happy. But that is a lie that's created by the eating disorder. You have to remind yourself that our happiness is not dependent on a certain size or weight. And it just reminds, you're sharing that story made me think of that, Jacquelyn, that so many of us have our lives on hold, thinking, well, when this happens, I'll take that vacation, or, when I feel better about my body, then I'll go to the beach or go in the water with my kids. And a lot of us are inadvertently missing out on a lot of rich moments and opportunities in our life because of that. And yeah, I'm really glad you shared that. I think it's important to remind ourselves that that shouldn't be a roadblock. And sometimes it's a matter of reframing our thinking and our own body acceptance that will change our ability to really thrive in life. That's a really good story. I'm glad you shared that. I'll share this resource really quickly while we're on this topic, but I don't know if you guys can see this. It's probably backwards. But this book is called Body Kindness: Transform Your Health from the Inside Out and Never Say Diet Again. And the author is Rebecca Scritchfield, who's a dietitian. And it's super easy to read. It's a really quick read. So if you're busy and you feel like, I don't have a lot of time, this is a really good resource. And it has a lot of really pretty illustrations throughout the book with some really easy, practical pointers on how you can apply body kindness. And I like that term, really striving to be intentional about being kinder to yourself. So I really recommend this resource, and I'll try to pull up the link to the book that I can stick in the chat. But did you have any resources, Jacquelyn, that you really enjoy that you wanted to share too?
Yeah, I think in terms of mindfulness, there is, I have watched some amazing TED Talks you could go to on YouTube on mindfulness with just remarkable speakers that bring sort of new insights to it. And those are nice. You can even, I think, listen to them while you're in the car and that sort of thing. And then all of Marsha Linehan's work. She is, I think she's a PhD at UW, and she's sort of the founder of this DBT therapy and how to do various self-soothing coping skills. And anything you can read by her about DBT or mindfulness, I think you can't go wrong.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, on the Eating Disorder Hope website, we have so many great articles written by various authors all about DBT and mindfulness. And there's a lot of articles too about mindful eating if you're interested in learning more about that. But you know, we can't forget to mention Eating Disorder Hope is such a great hub and wealth of information and many articles. You can go just put in the search bar mindfulness, mindful eating, DBT, and a lot of great resources will pop up. So if you're looking for some more reading, I would highly encourage you to head that way too.
Thank you, Crystal and Jacquelyn, and thank you for all the members for joining this support group today. Did either of you have any last words?
No, just thank you for being with us today, and I hope that you will find some useful mindfulness techniques that you can apply in life today, because you definitely deserve to treat yourself well.
Absolutely, and I would just end in saying too that thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here, and just remember that this journey is about progress, not perfection. Again, it's really easy to fall into that black and white thinking. And if you really struggle in this area, don't get discouraged. Just take one little step at a time each day. Do one thing for yourself that is progressing your journey in this area. And like Jacquelyn said, you absolutely deserve it. And I hope you can stay connected here with us, with our monthly support groups, but definitely get plugged into some form of support. Surround yourself with that positivity to keep you going when you feel like you're really struggling. And just know that you're loved and you deserve recovery.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you both. And I did add some helpful links in the chat box, including the link to the Pro Recovery Movement. If you guys want to check it out, it features some great articles on coping skills, body positivity, a lot of the things that we discussed here. And we hope to see you all at the next monthly support group, which takes place on Wednesday, July 5th at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And in the meantime, we invite you to continue the conversation in our private member forum, and I'll email the link out to all of you along with the recording of today's meeting. So we hope you all have a wonderful week and continue to make your recovery a priority. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Crystal. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.